Some men go shopping with their wives and return with groceries. I, on the other hand, returned with a Flamingo lamp. Don't ask me how, because truthfully, I'm still not entirely sure. One moment I was comparing the price of dish soap. The next, I was locking eyes with a neon pink bird that whispered, "Take me home." Of course, my wife had other opinions about this essential household item. Let's just say, by the end of the day, I learned two things. First, never trust me alone in the lighting aisle. And second, nothing tests a marriage quite like unexpected bird-shaped decor. So, settle in, grab your tea, and let me tell you about the day I went shopping with my wife and returned not with bread or milk, but with a Flamingo lamp that has since taken on a life of its own. It began, as many adventures do at our age, with a very sensible list. A list that included such glamorous items as bulb for the porch light, batteries for the kitchen scale, washing up sponges, and a new set of tea towels, without the strawberries this time, please. The strawberries had been cheerful. The strawberries had also faded to a color best described as optimistic ghost. Fair point. My wife is a practical woman, organized, decisive. She can look at a broken hinge and know the right size of screw simply by squinting. I, on the other hand, can spend 20 minutes in front of a shelf of screws, feeling like I'm auditioning for a role I didn't prepare for. We agreed on a plan. 2 shops, in, outside, home by lunch, no detours, no coffee until the list was complete, firm, sensibly stern. We even shook on it in the kitchen, like diplomats who had seen things. Error. Let me tell you, we set off on a Saturday that felt like it had ironed its shirt. Bright, tidy, a good day for errands, the sort of day that makes you believe things will go according to plan. Ah, hope, such a sweet flavor. The car started on the second try, which I took as a blessing. I queued up my driving to the shops playlist, mostly gentle music and one energetic song that insists I indicate 2 blocks early. My wife patted the list in her handbag with the tenderness of a passport. I patted my pockets for the 10th time. Phone, wallet, sanity, 2 out of 3 is a pass. Traffic was traffic, but the friendly kind. A white van let me merge with a little nod, and I offered the ritual wave that says, "I would bake you a casserole if I knew where you lived." We arrived at the retail park with only one minor incident involving me, misunderstanding a painted arrow, and the painted arrow misunderstanding me. No witnesses. Perfect crime. We parked near the big shop that sells everything from lampshades to left-handed spatulas, then realized we were 2 spaces away from the trolley corral. We did a tiny, quiet celebration. At this age, proximity to a trolley can be the difference between a pleasant outing and a saga. Inside, the air was a blend of cinnamon candles, fresh cardboard, and optimism. Shoppers did their careful Saturday dance, all avoiding each other and somehow arriving at the same shelf at once. My wife took the trolley's handle with authority and said, "Right. Sponges first." I saluted. We were a team. She was the general. I was the man responsible for not wandering off. We found the sponges. So many sponges. Sponges that promised to be kind to pans. Sponges that promised to defeat grease with confidence. Sponges with little smiley faces cut out, which felt both charming and slightly unsettling. We chose the sensible multi-pack because at our age there's an almost sensual joy in knowing you will not need sponges again for months. From there, batteries. I know nothing about batteries except that they are always more expensive than I expect, and there are more sizes than letters in the alphabet. We stood before the display, like people contemplating art. A, my wife said decisively, and a pack of A or E to. You never know. She is a prophet in a cardigan. Tea towels next. We considered stripes. We considered dots. We briefly flirted with ducks wearing hats, then admitted we would laugh every time we dried a plate and neither of us would recover. We chose a calm beige that matched nothing we own and therefore would match everything we own. Design. It's an attitude more than a plan. The list was moving along nicely. My wife ticked things off with satisfying little scratches of pen. I stood at attention in the aisle like a bodyguard who could also be distracted by a good mug. And then, because life enjoys a twist, we encountered the aisle. The aisle of lamps, row upon row of glowing shapes, tall ones that looked like they read newspapers, short ones that looked like they might gossip, shades in polite linen suits, shades in ruffles ready for a ballroom, a few modern ones that had clearly been grown in a laboratory from the DNA of a satellite. We had not come for a lamp. Lamp was not on the list. The list did not even mention light beyond the humble porch bulb, and yet, there we were. 2 moths, 1 aisle, a soup of possibilities. My wife said, "We'll just walk through." I said, "Of course." We both lied with love. We ambled. We admired. We turned switches on and off like responsible scientists. I found a lamp shaped like a stack of books and felt strangely seen. My wife found one that looked like it belonged in a Swedish detective drama and said, "Maybe." We nodded solemnly. A maybe in a lamp aisle is a binding contract to spend at least 2 more minutes there. That's when I saw it. At first, only a pink glow at the far end, a blush of light, like a thought. Then the shape emerged. A tall, elegant bird in profile. Slim legs, S-curved neck, beak with opinions, feathers sculpted into a lamp base that managed to be both ridiculous and dignified. A flamingo. An actual flamingo, with a shade the exact color of a happy grapefruit. I stopped. My wife stopped. We stood there in the shared good humor of people who know they are about to say the same thing at the same time. She said, "Absolutely not." I said, "Hear me out." We both laughed. The words perfectly choreographed. We are not flamingo people. We are not novelty lamp people. We are 2 middle-aged individuals with 2 sensible chairs, 1 sensible sofa, and a color scheme once described by a visiting niece as tea-colored chic. And yet, there it stood, charming, bold, just this side of tasteful, calling to us in the silent language of objects you never knew you needed. I did what any reasonable person would do. I switched it on. The pink light bloomed, not garish, not shy, just cheerful. The flamingo seemed to wink, which I'm sure was a quirk of the shade, but let me have my magic. My wife tilted her head. I tilted mine. We looked like 2 owls reviewing a proposal. "It is something," she said carefully. "We're not lamp people," I replied, which was our private way of saying that we absolutely were. A sales assistant appeared with the silent glide of a person trained to arrive exactly when needed. Her name badge said Jess, here to help, and she had the calm smile of someone who had seen things in the candle department and survived. "Wonderful choice," she said without preamble. We had not made a choice. We had barely made eye contact with the choice. Jess had beliefs, and she was prepared to share them. "People think flamingos are a phase," she continued. "They're not. They're a commitment to joy." We nodded like pilgrims. My wife's widened eyes said, We will not be the sort of people who buy a flamingo lamp. And also, I'm slightly tempted. Do you have it in a slightly less pink? My wife asked, which, let's be fair, is an excellent question to put to a flamingo. Jess considered. It also comes in teal, she said. Teal? We both repeated, as if she had just suggested trousers made entirely of marmalade. Teal, Jess confirmed, and white, but the pink is the one with personality. The pink did have personality. Undeniable, close to opinionated. The teal was gorgeous in a very magazine spread sort of way. The white looked like a swan who had given up ballet to take a desk job in accounts. But the pink was a flamingo lamp that knew exactly who it was. We agreed, as all sane people do when faced with a bold object, to walk away and think about it. This is a ritual. It means walk 2 aisles, look at baskets you do not need, and then find yourselves back at the flamingo. There it remained, gently glowing, elegantly silly, patient. We tested ourselves. We imagined it in the living room. We imagined visitors trying not to stare. We imagined the cat ignoring it pointedly, then adopting it as a life coach. We imagined ourselves laughing every time we turned it on. Sometimes the list is right. Sometimes the list is wise and needs to be followed to the letter. And sometimes the list is simply a door you walk through, and then keep walking. We could put it by the bookshelf, I suggested. My wife inhaled slowly. The corner that always looks a bit gloomy, she said. The chair corner, I added. The corner where guests sit and confess they once tried to make fudge and it became abstract art, she replied. We stared at the flamingo like people remembering that life is not only about washing up sponges. Jess reappeared. No pressure, just gravity wearing a lanyard. If you'd like, I can hold one at the till while you finish your list, she offered. My wife looked at me. I looked at my wife. We performed marriage math. The numbers didn't matter. The answer was joy. Yes, my wife said. Please, I added. Pink? Jess confirmed. Pink, we said together, like a password. We finished the sensible side of the list with the purposeful air of people who have done something outrageous and must now balance the scales by choosing the correct porch bulb on the first try. We did. Then we allowed ourselves a small victory coffee. We sat in cafe chairs that sounded like they were made of steel, but felt like they were made of stern opinions. We split a cinnamon swirl with the maturity of people who can share and still quietly resent the final bite in their hearts. My wife rested her hand on the now fully ticked list. We are absolutely ridiculous, she said. I know, I replied. We have made a flamingo decision. Yes, she said. We clinked paper cups like royalty on a budget. We collected the lamp from Jess, who had placed it near the till like a special guest. It came in a box large enough to be emotionally significant, with a neat line drawing of a flamingo on the side and pink letters that made their own announcement. Carrying it to the car was an event. I walked with that careful hips-forward stride of someone transporting a cake or a prophecy. My wife carried the bag of sponges like a chaperone. We loaded the flamingo with ceremony. Seatbelt on the box, we considered it. We compromised with a gentle wedge of shopping bags to stop any wobble. Safety first, even for pink birds. In the car, we sat for a moment in shared silence. Not doubt, not exactly. Just the pleasant strangeness of what we had done. It's funny how an object can make space where there wasn't any. In your living room, in your day, in your head. where you thought all the rooms were already named. On the drive home, the conversation was nothing and everything. Would the shade need dusting more often than we usually tolerate? Probably. Would guests ask about it? Certainly. Would it go with the beige tea towels? Absolutely not, but maybe it would make the beige look deliberate, a soothing choice, rather than a lack of imagination. That's the thing about a flamingo. It lends other things courage. We pulled into our driveway still laughing at ourselves. We carried in the sponges, the batteries, the tea towels first, because order matters, even in rebellion. The flamingo waited in the hallway like a visiting relative to be adored. Our cat inspected the box and made a small chirrup noise. Approval? Warning. Hard to say. Then he rubbed his cheek on the cardboard, which, in cat law, means I own part of this now. We unpacked the lamp with reverence. There it was, tall, glossy, ridiculous in the very best way. The shade slid into place with a satisfying muted click. We carried it into the living room, into the chair corner, the gloomy chair corner, the confessional fudge chair corner. I took a breath. I flicked the switch. Pink light warmed the room like an unexpected laugh. Everything in the corner brightened, then softened. The old bookshelf looked whimsical instead of tired. The neutral rug seemed to blush. The chair sat up straighter, as if called on in class. We both stood there, mugs in hand, quietly delighted. Absolutely not, my wife said again, on principle. Then she smiled. Absolutely yes. We stood side by side, the way we do when we try on something brave. The cat hopped onto the chair and looked at the flamingo with professional curiosity. One paw lifted toward the shade. No, we said together, calm but urgent. He withdrew, blinking the slow blink that means he has assessed our boundaries and filed them under optional. We turned the flamingo on and off a few more times, because part of the joy of a new thing is practicing joy. On. Office on. Office later, we considered names. We're not usually people who name lamps, but we had crossed a threshold. We tried Florence, Flory, Flick, Margot, and Captain Lightbeak. Vetoed instantly, though with affection. We landed on Gertie, Gertie the flamingo. She seemed to accept it, and I will not be explaining that sentence to my accountant. By evening, the house had absorbed her. We dimmed the other lights and sat with Gertie glowing while we read aloud only the soothing parts of the news. We spoke about where else she might look good. Perhaps by the plant table in winter. Perhaps in the hallway during parties. Perhaps nowhere but here. Before bed, my wife ticked the final line on the list. Porch bulb, batteries, sponges, tea towels. And then, on a clean line, she wrote, 1 flamingo lamp. Joy level. Pink. We put the list on the fridge like a postcard from a place we weren't sure we'd ever visit, but did. I turned Gertie off. The room returned to its ordinary evening self. We climbed the stairs, still amused with ourselves, in that way that floats you to sleep. In the hallway, I looked back down at the dark room where a flamingo had introduced itself to our sensible lives, and I whispered, welcome. Morning arrived in its usual quiet way, except it wasn't quite usual. For one thing, the corner of the living room now had a resident, a tall, pink, confident resident. I padded down the stairs with my tea, dressing gown slightly askew, slippers remembering yesterday's shape of my feet, and there she was, Gertie, standing in the corner as if she had been there since the day we moved in. And here's the thing. In daylight, she looked entirely different. The shade wasn't glowing, so the flamingo shape stood out in crisp, undeniable detail. Slim legs, curved neck, that slightly judgmental beak. She looked self-assured, the kind of lamp that might interview you before allowing you to sit in the chair beside her. My wife appeared in the doorway, hair still in its morning meeting state, holding her own tea. We both looked at Gertie. We both sipped. "She's very pink in daylight," my wife observed. "She's confident," I replied, my polite way of saying, "She's pink enough to be visible from space." We drank in companionable silence, both pretending we weren't wondering what the neighbors would think if they saw her through the window. That question was answered sooner than expected. At precisely 8:47 a.m., our neighbor Mrs. Ellis wandered past on her morning constitutional, a brisk lap around the block, 3 times, to keep the knees honest. Mrs. Ellis dresses for her walks as if she might be called upon to pose for a local newspaper at any moment. Neat scarf, tidy jacket, shoes polished to the point you could see the clouds reflected in them. Her gaze landed on the corner window. Her pace slowed. She squinted, tilted her head, then, quite suddenly, smiled, and gave a tiny thumbs up. Mrs. Ellis is a woman of few words, so a thumbs up is the equivalent of a 3-paragraph letter of recommendation. We returned the thumbs up from behind the glass, though my wife did it subtly, because she didn't want to encourage any sort of public Flamingo discussion before she'd finished her tea. Breakfast happened. Toast, marmalade, more tea. But it happened with frequent glances toward the living room. Every so often, one of us would say, "She does work there, doesn't she?" And the other would nod reassuringly. The cat, meanwhile, had clearly decided Gertie was a new member of the household staff. He circled her twice, slow and deliberate, the way a security guard might check a new gate, sat down, stared, then leapt lightly into the chair beside her, curled up, and began to purr. This was not his usual chair. This was his statement. "This corner is now important," he was saying. "I shall guard it." By mid-morning, we had a new mission. We needed an extension lead. The plug nearest to Gertie was occupied by the record player, and swapping them every time we wanted, Light felt undignified. Gertie deserved her own power supply. So after lunch, we set out again, just to get an extension lead. Here's the thing about just. Just is the most dangerous word in shopping. Just is how you go out for milk and come home with a waffle iron. We entered the hardware shop, determined. We found the extension leads quickly enough, and then stood there staring at a wall of them, trying to remember which length would reach the socket without making the corner look like a cable storage depot. 2 meters. 3. 4. My wife favored 3. I leaned toward 4. We compromised by buying one of each, because one day, we reasoned, we might need a spare, or a different configuration, or to host a party where everyone brings an appliance. You never know. Of course, while there, my wife spotted a small round table mat that she declared would be perfect under Gertie's base, protect the carpet, make her look intentional. I had not considered that Gertie might need a stage, but now, of course she did. A flamingo lamp cannot simply stand. She must arrive. While she was deciding between natural jute and charcoal gray, I became distracted by a display of novelty doorstops shaped like hedgehogs. I stood there, considering whether one would change my life. It probably wouldn't, but it might make the hallway feel friendlier. We left with 2 extension leads. A table mat, natural jute, won the vote, and a packet of biscuits we did not need but could not leave behind once we saw they were cinnamon shortbread. Back home, the installation ceremony began. Extension lead plugged in, cord neatly tucked behind the chair, mat positioned just so. Gertie placed on top like the final flourish of a wedding cake. We stepped back. Perfect. We flicked the switch. Pink glow. Corner transformed. It was as if the entire living room sighed happily. The afternoon drifted along. Reading, tea, occasional cat watching, until my wife announced she was just popping into the garden for a moment. When she returned, she was carrying the garden chair from the patio. "I think we should try her there," she said. And so began the Great Gertie Tour. First stop, by the window in the dining room. Not bad. She caught the light, but her pink shade clashed with the table runner in a way that made the whole room feel like a disagreement. Then, in the hallway near the coat stand. Surprisingly effective, except for the fact that it made the hallway feel like it was being silently judged every time you put on a hat. For a bold experiment, we tried her in the kitchen corner near the breakfast table. This was chaos. The pink light made the toast look embarrassed and the fridge hummed disapprovingly. Finally, the upstairs landing. This was a logistical nightmare, balancing her carefully up the stairs while the cat tried to help by weaving between our feet. Up there, she looked oddly magnificent, but also made the space feel like a film set for a very specific soap opera. We carried her back to the living room, apologizing as we went. The chair corner, we decided, was her true home. Around 4 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. It was Alan from 2 doors down, returning a ladder he had borrowed back in April. He stepped into the hallway, spotted Gertie instantly through the living room door, and froze. "Is that—" he began. "It is," I said. He grinned. "Brilliant." And just like that, Gertie had her first public fan. Alan asked where we'd found her, and when we told him, he nodded slowly, as if filing the information away for the day his own living room needed an intervention. Before leaving, he added, "You'll need to name her." We smiled politely, not telling him we already had. Naming a lamp too soon might make us sound unhinged. Dinner was simple: pasta, salad, and the cinnamon shortbread for dessert, but all eaten under the watchful pink glow. After dinner, as we settled into our evening, I realized she'd changed the way we used the room. Before Gertie, the chair corner was an afterthought. We'd sit on the sofa. We'd read under the main light. The corner was a place you walked past, not to. Now, I found myself drawn to it. The chair looked inviting. The light was softer. It felt alive. I caught my wife glancing over at the corner, too. Quiet way you look at something you've adopted and think, yes, you belong here. By bedtime, my wife was the one turning Gertie on just for a moment before we went upstairs. We stood there, mugs in hand, gazing at our ridiculous, perfect, unapologetically pink lamp. "She does make the room," my wife admitted. "She makes the day," I said. We laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from knowing you've done something both unnecessary and absolutely right. And so, Gertie stayed on for one last glow before we finally climbed the stairs. From halfway up, I looked back. The corner light was soft, warm, a little silly, a little wonderful. I thought about the list we had started with: sponges, batteries, tea towels, a porch bulb. And somewhere between all that, we'd made space for something that made us smile every time we looked at it, which, I suppose, is exactly the kind of thing worth making space for. Leonard was glowing, not metaphorically, literally glowing. There he stood, pink, proud, slightly leaning to the left like a bird with an opinion, a flamingo lamp in my living room. If you had told me a month ago that my evenings would involve adjusting a flamingo's vibe, I would have laughed, Then I would have gone back to watching the news and muttering about the price of cheese. But here we were. Leonard was here. And judging by the way my wife was staring at him, he wasn't just here. He was about to become a full-scale home improvement project. That my wife was circling Leonard like a real estate agent sizing up a property. She had her arms folded, her head tilted to the left, her lips pressed together. This was the face of someone who was about to say something dangerous. Finally, she spoke. Something's off. I looked at Leonard. He was a lamp. He was on. He was doing his job, which, last I checked, was being a lamp. "What's off?" I asked cautiously. She ignored my tone completely. "Too close to the window." I turned my head. Leonard was indeed near the window, not blocking the sunlight, not melting, just standing there. "He's fine," I said. She gave me the look, the one that means my opinion had been logged, acknowledged, and then placed in the bin marked, "Not important right now." "Sunlight can fade his personality," she explained. I stared at her. Leonard didn't have a personality. He was made of metal, a bulb, and a questionable shade of pink plastic. But I've been married long enough to know that this was not the time for logic. We entered what I call the zone. When my wife says something's off, it means furniture will move, accessories will swap places, and I will be recruited for heavy lifting without the option to decline. "Help me move him," she said, and so the rearranging began. Step 1, coffee table, shifted 6 inches to the left. Step 2, Leonard, rotated 15 degrees clockwise. Why 15? Because that's what felt right. Step 3, she fluffed the couch pillows with enough force to qualify as cardio. The plant next to Leonard looked uneasy. Its leaves seemed to be leaning away from him. I'm not saying plants can sense danger, but she stepped back, tilted her head again. "No," she said, "he needs a backdrop." Now, when my wife says backdrop, she doesn't mean the wall behind him. She means something that adds depth, something that brings the scene together, something that, frankly, cost me at least an hour of my life. We have plenty of walls in this house. Plain walls, painted walls, one wall with a suspicious crack shaped like the state of Florida, which I've tried unsuccessfully to convince guests is a modern art piece. But apparently, none of them would do. She disappeared into the hallway closet. And when I say closet, I mean a place where time stands still and forgotten items multiply in the dark. Opening that door was like breaking into an archaeological site. We found 3 rolls of seashell wallpaper, a set of curtains labeled extra festive, a snowman mug from the dentist, a badminton racket missing its strings, a box labeled random chords, do not throw away, content still unknown. "Oh, remember this?" she said, holding up the snowman mug. I did. The dentist had given it to her after she got a crown, which was bold, considering she couldn't drink anything hot for a week. She dug deeper and pulled out a deep teal curtain. "This," she said, "might work." I didn't see how a curtain was going to help a flamingo lamp, but I also knew better than to question the vision. Questioning the vision only results in more explanations, and those are always followed by more work. So we set up the curtain behind Leonard, stepped back. Now Leonard looked like he was about to headline a jazz club. "Perfect," she whispered. It wasn't perfect, because that was when Biscuit, the neighbor's beagle, appeared at the window, and he was staring at Leonard like Leonard had just stolen his bone. I stood there, watching my wife and Biscuit both studying Leonard from different angles. The curtain swayed gently behind him. Leonard's light flickered once, almost like he was nervous, and that was just the beginning. Biscuit didn't blink, not once, just stood there at the window, ears perked, eyes locked on Leonard. The beagle looked like a small-town sheriff staring down a stranger who'd just rolled in. My wife noticed too. "Do you think he likes Leonard?" she asked. I tilted my head. Biscuit tilted his. It was unsettling. "Or maybe," I suggested, "he thinks Leonard is a giant pink bird and is wondering why it hasn't moved in 5 minutes. She frowned at me. "It's a lamp," she said. "Yes," I replied, "but Biscuit doesn't have the concept of lamp in his vocabulary." We stared at Biscuit. Biscuit stared at Leonard. Leonard stared at nothing because, again, he's a lamp. Then Biscuit's owner, Marge, appeared in the driveway. She waved cheerfully and called out, "He's been doing that since yesterday." Yesterday, Leonard had only been in that spot for an hour, which meant either Marge had confused her days, or there was another pink object in our window that had been worrying Biscuit all this time. I made a mental note to investigate later. "Come on," my wife said. "Help me move Leonard again. The curtain's good, but now he's too far from the plant." We shuffled Leonard 3 feet to the right, then adjusted the curtain, then moved the plant so it was close enough to frame him, but far enough to breathe. I'd never considered whether plants needed personal space, but apparently they do. She stepped back again, frowned, sighed. "What now?" I asked, already bracing my spine for another round of rearranging. "The curtain. It's wrinkled," she said gravely. I looked. It was a curtain. Curtains wrinkle, it's their thing. But this wasn't just any wrinkle. This was a visible from across the room and ruining the mood wrinkle. I suggested steaming it. She suggested replacing it entirely. I suggested leaving it as natural texture. She suggested I go find the iron. Guess which suggestion won? We don't iron curtains in this house often. In fact, I think the last time the iron saw daylight was when we accidentally made a grilled cheese sandwich on it during a power outage. Don't ask. While she fussed with the iron, I tried to keep Leonard steady. I stood there, one hand on his neck, one foot on the base, as if I were guarding a very fragile, very flamboyant treasure. Biscuit, still outside, had shifted positions. Now he was lying down, chin on the windowsill, eyes fixed on the operation. It felt like we were performing surgery and he was the concerned relative. The iron hissed. Steam rose. My wife smoothed the curtain with slow, deliberate strokes like she was diffusing a bomb. At one point, she leaned back and asked, "Do you think teal really works with pink?" This was a trap, a very obvious, well-laid trap. If I said no, we'd spend the next 3 hours hunting for a better backdrop. If I said yes, she might change her mind halfway through and blame me for agreeing. So I did what any experienced husband would do. I made a thoughtful humming noise and said, "It depends on the lighting." She seemed satisfied with that, for now. Once the curtain was wrinkle-free, we reinstalled it. Leonard looked exactly the same to me. To her, however, he looked refreshed, vibrant, and more grounded in the space. I nodded as if I could see all that. Biscuit wagged his tail once, which I took as approval. We were done. At least, I thought we were done. Then she said the 5 most dangerous words in home decor history. What about the rest of the room? In that moment, I realized Leonard had not simply been placed in our living room. He had been introduced, and introductions lead to renovations. We started with the side table. Apparently, it was competing with Leonard. I didn't know furniture could compete, but I guess the table had been giving off too much energy. Then came the bookshelf. Not the whole thing, just the top shelf. The books were too horizontal. We stood there rearranging hardcovers like we were curating an exhibit in a very specific museum. By the time we finished, the living room looked different. Not bad, just different, like someone had been in and quietly rearranged reality. Leonard, though, stood tall and proud, teal curtain behind him, plant at his side, Biscuit still watching from outside, now chewing a stick in what I hoped was satisfaction. And me? I was already planning my escape route before she said, "So," she began with that tone, the tone that says, "I have a small idea that will ruin your entire evening." "What if," she continued, "we just shifted the couch a little?" I blinked. The couch. Our couch, which weighed roughly the same as a small car and had been in that exact spot since we moved in. "How much is a little?" I asked cautiously. She pointed across the room, just over there, near the window. "It'll balance the space with Leonard." Balance the space. Two very innocent-sounding words. But in marriage, they are code for we are about to move everything you own while pretending it's just one thing. Partido feature. I sighed and got behind the couch. We counted to 3. We pushed. And here's the thing about moving a couch. It's never just the couch. It's the dust bunnies. It's the coins that somehow melted into the carpet. It's the pen cap you lost in 2014. I froze, thinking I'd run over her foot. But no, she had found the missing remote. This was a remote we had declared lost forever 3 Christmases ago. We'd replaced it. We'd mourned it. And now it was here, under the couch, like a time capsule from a simpler era. She held it up like an archaeologist finding a priceless relic. "We can use it in the guest room," she said. "We don't even have a TV in the guest room," but I nodded anyway. Once the couch was in place, we both stepped back. She tilted her head. I tilted mine. It was different, wider somehow. Leonard, from his new corner, looked even more like the star of the room. Biscuit was still at the window, looking slightly confused about why the entire seating arrangement had shifted. "Now," she said, "what about the rug?" The rug had done nothing wrong. It was innocent, but apparently it wasn't anchoring the room anymore. So we rolled it up, rotated it, and rolled it back down. Then we tried diagonal, then we tried slightly off-center for a casual look. Eventually, we returned it to exactly where it had been. I was sweating. She was glowing, which is infuriating because we had been doing the same amount of work. Then came the coffee table. It needed more breathing room, so we moved it 2 inches. She stood back, frowned, moved it 1 inch back. This went on for 5 full minutes. We ended up in the original position, but now she was satisfied because she had seen the possibilities. It was at this point I realized something. We were not rearranging furniture. We were chasing a feeling. And once you're chasing a feeling, there's no telling where you'll end up. Case in point, next, she suggested we just swap the lamp in the corner with the one in the hallway. I protested, The hallway lamp didn't match the living room. She argued that was the point. Contrast, she said. Interest, she said. It'll make Leonard pop, she said. So we swapped them, then swapped them back, then swapped them one more time just to be sure. At some point, Biscuit barked loudly. It was the first sound he'd made all day. We both looked out the window. There was another dog, a golden retriever, strolling by. Biscuit looked torn between guarding the lamp and joining the parade. The retriever glanced up at Leonard, paused, then kept walking. I swear Leonard looked smug. Back inside, my wife was already eyeing the wall art. "What if we—" she began. I cut her off. "No," she blinked. "Just hear me out." "No." We stared at each other. It was a standoff, the kind of standoff only married couples understand. Finally, she smiled, which was more terrifying than any glare. "Okay," she said sweetly, "we're done." We weren't done. I knew we weren't done. But for now, Leonard was lit. The curtain was crisp, the couch was shifted, and Biscuit was finally lying down. I collapsed into the newly positioned couch. It felt wrong, different, like wearing your watch on the other wrist. But she curled up next to me, looking entirely pleased with herself. And I realized the room did feel warmer. Not because of Leonard's bulb, but because of the ridiculous effort we'd put into it. Still, I made a mental note to buy furniture sliders, because if I knew anything about us, this was just round one. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of Tuesday where nothing much happens, except Harold. We'd barely finished lunch. I was still chewing my last bite of cheese sandwich when there came a knock. 3 sharp knocks. Not the polite, just in the neighborhood kind. The "I'm here and I know you're home" kind. I peeked through the window. There he was. Harold, flat cap, wool cardigan, expression like a man who just spotted a wiring violation from 50 yards. My wife smiled. "Oh, good," she said. "Harold can see the lamp." I swallowed quickly and went to the door. "Harold, afternoon." He nodded, the way people do when they're not here for small talk. "I heard," he began, "you've got yourself an exotic lighting situation." He didn't even wait for me to reply. He stepped in, no shoes removed, straight through the hallway, like a man on a mission. And there it was. Leonard, glowing in the corner, his pink feathers lit from within, beak proudly angled towards the sofa. Harold stopped dead. "Well," he said slowly, "that's something." My wife appeared with tea. She loves Harold, or at least she loves his stories, which once started are almost impossible to stop. "Harold," she said, "what do you think?" He tilted his head. "Well, first thought, Flamingo. Second thought, wiring. Third thought, do you know what amperage that bulb's pulling?" I confessed we did not. He looked concerned. "I've seen things," he said. "Oh, I've seen things. Back in '78, a lamp not unlike this one burst into flames in Mrs. Pritchard's conservatory." We both gasped, not because of Mrs. Pritchard, because this was exactly the sort of thing Harold would say. "But it's fine now, right?" my wife asked. "Oh yes, we rebuilt the conservatory. Lovely job." Except she insisted on keeping the charred remains of the lamp as a plant stand. Harold crouched down, examined Leonard's base like a jeweler inspecting a rare diamond. "Solid," he muttered. "Good weight. But the cord—" He tugged gently at the cord, made a face. "You'll want to watch that bend there. Bends in cords are like creases in trousers. Once they're set, they never come out." My wife gave me a look. The one that says, "Just nod and let him talk." So I nodded. Harold stood up. "You know," he said, "I could install you a dimmer, or a switch at the other end of the room. That way you don't have to get up to turn him off." My wife's eyes lit up. "Oh, that would be—" "No," I interrupted. "Last time Harold helped with wiring, we lost power to the kitchen for 2 days. Also the toaster. Also half of the garden lights." Harold laughed. "That's just because you had that odd old fuse box, nothing like a challenge. Besides, this Flamingo deserves proper lighting control. Imagine a slow fade at dusk." "Romantic," I glanced at Leonard. If he was capable of emotion, I think he would have blushed. Harold took his tea, sat down, started reminiscing about the golden age of lamps. According to Harold, it was somewhere between 1965 and 1972 when lamps were made to last, and you could drop one off the back of a lorry and it would still work. My wife asked him about shades. Wrong move. We got 20 minutes on fabric density, pleat spacing, and the tragic decline of tassels in modern design. Meanwhile, Leonard kept glowing, proud, silent, possibly smug. Finally, Harold stood. "I'll bring my tools round tomorrow," he announced. Before I could object, he was halfway out the door. "And maybe," he added, "I'll find that dimmer switch I've been saving." The door closed. Silence. My wife sipped her tea. "Well," she said, "that was nice." I looked at Leonard. He seemed to be waiting, and I had a bad feeling tomorrow was going to involve a lot more than a cup of tea. The next morning I made a plan. A quiet plan. Avoid Harold. Stay indoors. Keep the curtains closed. By 9 a.m., I was halfway through my second cup of coffee. The house was still. Leonard was glowing faintly in the corner. I'd plugged him in just to check he was fine. And then, a shadow passed the frosted glass by the front door. A knock. 3 sharp knocks, the exact same as yesterday. I opened the door an inch. There he was. Harold, cardigan again, this time with a toolbox and a coil of something that looked suspiciously like wiring slung over his shoulder. "Morning," he boomed. "Brought the bits." I sighed, stepped back. He walked in like a man entering his own workshop. "I was thinking about that cord all night," he said. "Couldn't sleep. You can't leave a cord like that. It's just disrespectful to the lamp." My wife emerged from the kitchen with a smile. "Oh, Harold, how lovely. Would you like tea first?" "Tea after, wiring first. Tea is for celebrating a job well done." He set the toolbox on the coffee table. Leonard's light reflected off the shiny metal latches. Harold opened it with a click. Inside was a chaos of pliers, screwdrivers, electrical tape, a strange measuring device, and, I swear, a pastry brush. "What's the brush for?" I asked. "Dust. You can't rewire dusty fittings. It's unprofessional." He pulled Leonard's plug from the socket. "Right. Step 1. Safety. Step 2. Better cord routing." I glanced at my wife. She was already sitting back, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Harold worked quickly, too quickly. Snip, twist, mutter something about continental fittings. Then he stopped, held up a tiny screw. "This," he said, "is why I came. Look at the threading. Look at it." I looked. It was a screw, small, screw-like. "This," Harold said, "is quality. Not like the cheap rubbish you get now. This is a screw that'll outlive us all." He set it on the arm of the sofa like it was a rare coin, then went back to work. At one point, he had Leonard lying on his side, feathers akimbo. Harold's head bent low, muttering about load distribution and optimal flex points. "Are you sure he'll still light up after this?" I asked. Harold looked offended. "Of course, he'll light better, you'll see. He'll have a glow that says, "This is a lamp that's been cared for." My wife chuckled. "You do care about your lamps, Harold." "Not just lamps," he said. "All electrical appliances, but lamps. Lamps are the soul of a room." He paused, looked at Leonard. "Some people think it's the sofa, or the pictures on the wall. It's the lamp. The lamp says who you are." That made me nervous, because right now, our lamp said, "We impulse buy neon birds." Finally, Harold straightened up. "Done," he announced. He plugged Leonard back in, flicked the switch. Leonard lit up. Not just lit, gleamed. Brighter somehow, like he'd had a spa day. "There," Harold said proudly. "Perfect." And I added a switch extension. He pointed to a small switch now clipped to the side of the coffee table. You don't even have to lean forward. One flick. Boom. Flamingo. I had to admit, it was convenient. Dangerous maybe, but convenient. We made tea. Harold drank his with 3 sugars. Apparently, rewiring lamps is energy work. As he sipped, he told us about a lamp he'd once saved from a skip. "Beautiful thing," he said. "Porcelain base, hand-painted scenes of the Lake District. Somebody just threw it out. Criminal. I brought it home, rewired it, sold it to a chap in Huddersfield. Still working, last I heard." By the time Harold left, Leonard was glowing brighter than ever. And I had a feeling this was only the beginning. Because Harold doesn't just fix things, he adopts them. Sure enough, as he walked down the path, he turned. "You know," he called, "I've got a matching heron lamp in the shed. Could make a set." I closed the door quickly. 2 glowing birds in the living room. One was already a lot to explain. 2 days passed without Harold. This was unusual. Normally, Harold operated like a cat. If you feed it once, it appears at your door forever. But on the 3rd day, the knock came. Not 3 times. Not the firm rapping of a man with a mission. This was softer. Almost hesitant, I opened the door. There stood Harold, holding something under a blanket. A long, lumpy something. "I've been thinking," he said. Oh. "Thinking about balance," he continued. "Balance in a room. You've got a flamingo lamp now. Beautiful. But the other side of the room..." He stepped in without waiting for an invitation. The blanket shifted. Something metallic gleamed beneath. My wife appeared from the kitchen. "Oh, Harold," she said, "what have you got there?" "A gift," Harold said solemnly. "For balance." He placed it on the floor, pulled the blanket away. It was a heron lamp, taller than Leonard, longer beak, standing in what looked like a small imitation pond. The base had fake ripples. I blinked. My wife laughed out loud. "It's magnificent," she said. "Magnificent and lonely," Harold added. "Been in my shed for 5 years, waiting for the right home. Now it's found it." I glanced at Leonard. His neon pink glow seemed almost challenged. The heron's bulb gave off a softer, more elegant light, white with a hint of blue, like moonlight on water. "They'll balance each other perfectly," Harold said, adjusting the heron's position. "One's the sunset, the other's the dawn." "That's poetic," I muttered. For the next 20 minutes, Harold rearranged the entire living room. Sofa moved 2 inches left. Coffee table angled. Leonard slightly forward. Heron slightly back. All for sightline optimization. By the time he was done, the room looked like a nature documentary still frame. Birds frozen mid-stare, guarding their respective halves of the room. We had tea again. Harold beamed every time he looked at the heron. He told us its backstory. Bought it at a car boot sale in '98. Seller said it came from a pub refurbishment. I think it's older, possibly 70s, maybe Italian. My wife listened with polite interest. I was trying to figure out where we'd store this thing if it ever needed to disappear. Then Harold leaned forward. Now, about the unveiling. The what? I asked. The neighborhood unveiling. People need to see this. These two together. It's art. You don't hide art. Before I could argue, he had a plan. Saturday. We'll invite a few people. I'll bring sausage rolls. You got chairs? Apparently, we were hosting a lamp unveiling, a social event centered entirely around our living room's avian glow. Saturday arrived faster than I'd hoped. By 3 o'clock, the room was full. Neighbors we barely knew, Mrs. Dalrymple from down the road, who talks only about her cats, young couple from number 12 who just moved in, and of course, Harold at the center, introducing everyone to Leonard and Moonlight, as he'd now named the heron. He gave a speech, a real speech, spoke about the importance of light in dark times, about bringing warmth into a home, about how a lamp is never just a lamp, it's a beacon. My wife clapped. Some neighbors clapped. I sipped my tea, wondering if anyone else thought this was slightly ridiculous. Then something odd happened. People started taking sides. Some preferred Leonard's bold pink statement. Others loved Moonlight's soft, sophisticated glow. Mrs. Dalrymple declared herself Team Heron. The young couple liked the Flamingo because it's fun. By the end of the afternoon, Harold was moderating what he called a friendly artistic debate. I called it people arguing about bird lamps. When everyone left, the house was quiet again. Leonard and Moonlight stood in their assigned spots, silently glowing. My wife curled up on the sofa. "Well," she said, "that was fun." "Fun?" I asked. "We just hosted a bird lamp convention." She laughed. "You have to admit, they do look good together." I looked at the lamps. Leonard seemed less lonely now. Moonlight? Well, Moonlight was growing on me. But I had one lingering fear. If Harold could add a heron, what else could he add? A pelican? A stork? An entire aviary? I made a mental note. Next time Harold knocks, don't open the door. It was Wednesday morning, a quiet one. The kind of morning where the only sound is the hum of the fridge and the occasional sigh from my wife as she flips through a gardening magazine. Then came the knock. Sharp, authoritative. 3 quick raps, a pause, and then one extra, like a judge bringing order to a courtroom. "That," my wife whispered, "is Margaret. Margaret from 3 doors down, retired school principal, runs the neighborhood watch, has the uncanny ability to make you feel like you're in trouble, even if you've done absolutely nothing wrong." I opened the door. "Good morning, Margaret." She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply scanned me, like a customs officer deciding whether I was fit to enter my own home. "I hear," she said, "you've acquired a lamp." I blinked. 2, actually. Her eyes narrowed. 2? Before I could explain, she stepped inside. No invitation, just in. Like she owned the place. She stopped in the middle of the living room, hands on hips, head slightly tilted. Her gaze moved from Leonard the Flamingo to Moonlight the heron. "Oh my," she said at last. Her voice held the same tone she'd probably used on a student caught carving their name into a desk. "They're quite something," she added. I couldn't tell if it was a compliment or a warning. My wife came in, cheerful as ever. "Margaret, have a seat, tea." "No tea," Margaret said. "I have questions." Questions, of course she did. She walked slowly around the lamps, inspecting them as though checking for contraband. "Where did you get them?" she asked. "Leonard was from the homeware shop," I said. "Moonlight came from Harold." At the mention of Harold, she pursed her lips. "Harold," she repeated, as if tasting something sour. Margaret leaned closer to Leonard. Is this electric? Yes. Not gas? No, Margaret, it's not gas. She tapped the flamingo's base. Then she moved to Moonlight. Interesting pairing, she said. Birds, indoor birds. My wife smiled. They brightened the room. Margaret didn't smile back. They will also, set expectations. I frowned. What expectations? That you were eccentric. She delivered the word like a doctor diagnosing something terminal. Margaret sat down, crossing her legs. When people see unusual decor, they start to wonder what else is unusual. It's a slippery slope. One day it's a pink bird lamp. The next you're painting your garage door turquoise. My wife laughed. I think we're safe. Margaret wasn't convinced. You've already had one neighbor contribute to the madness. I hear there was an unveiling. I looked at my wife. Harold's little event had made the rounds, apparently. Margaret continued. People talk. They think you're cultivating a collection. She leaned forward. Are you? No, I said firmly. But in my head, I wasn't so sure. Harold had mentioned pelicans. The thought haunted me at night. Margaret stood up. Well, I came to see for myself. Now I have. She started toward the door, then stopped. One last thing. If you must acquire more lamps, at least keep them within the same thematic discipline. I stared. Thematic discipline? Yes. Don't start mixing birds with, say, ceramic lighthouses. That's how chaos begins. With that, she left. Just gone. The scent of strong perfume lingered in the hallway like an aftertaste. My wife turned to me. Well, she said, that was, Margaret. I sank into the sofa. She thinks we're eccentric. You're eccentric, my wife said with a smile. I glanced at Leonard and Moonlight. Were they looking smug? It was hard to tell with lamps. But something told me. Margaret hadn't seen the last of them, or of us. Thursday evening, cool air outside, smell of cinnamon inside, biscuits cooling on the counter, tea steam curling like a lazy ghost. Then, the knock. 3 taps. Pause. 1 more tap. Margaret, I whispered to my wife. It's her, the Flamingo detective. My wife half smiled. Do you think she's come to apologize? I snorted. Margaret? Apologize. That woman would rather knit a full scarf out of telephone cords. I opened the door. There she was, wool coat buttoned up tight, hat perched like it was glued on. Under her arm, a folder. Under the folder, her suspicious, no-nonsense face. Evening, she said. She didn't wait for me to reply. She just marched in like she'd been deputized. She sat down, crossed her legs like she was about to interrogate me, placed the folder on the coffee table. Open it, she said. I opened it. Inside, glossy pages, bright pictures, birds, dozens of birds, not alive, lamp birds, flamingos, owls, parrots, peacocks. Each one turned into some sort of light source. One looked like it was mid-sneeze. One looked like it regretted life. One, a pelican, looked like it had just swallowed a small sofa. What is this? I asked. Exhibit A, she said. Evidence of your impending downfall. I looked at my wife. She calmly sipped tea like she was watching a gardening program. Margaret leaned forward. It starts with 1 flamingo lamp. Next thing you know, your lounge looks like an exotic bird sanctuary run by an electrician. She tapped a picture. A heron lamp with a long curling neck. It's a gateway bird, she said gravely. I couldn't help it. I laughed. She didn't. Laugh now, she said. But I've seen this before. Back in 2003. Gerald from Maple Street bought a duck lamp as a joke. 2 months later, he had 12. The man's living room was quacking. My wife leaned in. That actually sounds kind of charming. Margaret's head snapped toward her. Oh no! Oh no, no, no! That's how it begins! She turned a page. The peacock lamp, feathers exploding in blues and greens, shade like a royal crown. This one will whisper to you, she said. You'll hear it late at night. Buy me, I said. Margaret, are you suggesting the lamps talk? She gave me a look. I'm suggesting they call you, and you'll answer. Another page, the pelican again, that ridiculous beak. This one, she said, tapping the photo, took down an entire marriage in Brighton. I raised a brow. A lamp ended a marriage? Margaret nodded solemnly. She bought it. He hated it. Next thing you know, she's redecorating. By the end of the year, they divided the houseplants in the settlement. I couldn't tell if she was joking. And that made it worse. She slid the catalog toward me. Keep it, she said, not for buying, for warning. Flip through it when temptation strikes. Leonard, our flamingo lamp, flickered right then, almost smug. Margaret narrowed her eyes at him. You think you're clever, don't you? She muttered. She stood, fastened her coat. Don't go to the Tuesday meeting, she said. What Tuesday meeting? Her voice dropped. The illuminated aviary. I blinked. The what? They meet in the community hall, she whispered. All bird lamp owners, they think it's just a hobby group, but I know better. Then she was gone. Out into the night, leaving us with the catalog and a very self-satisfied lamp. My wife took another sip of tea. Well, she said, obviously we're going to that meeting. I groaned. We are not going to... But I couldn't finish, because that pelican lamp really did look quite nice. Tuesday arrived with a gentle drizzle, the kind that taps softly on the window, not enough to spoil plans, just enough to remind you it's not summer yet. My wife was ready. She stood by the door, coat on, shoes polished. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. Shall we? She asked. I grabbed the Flamingo catalog, stuffed it under my arm, trying to act casual. The car ride was quiet, a mix of anticipation and mild dread. The community hall was a small brick building, familiar but mysterious. A blue sign read, Community Hall, Events and Meetings. Inside, the air smelled of old wood and lemon polish. The lights were warm, software. And then, bird lamps. They were everywhere, perched on tables, resting on the floor, dangling from ceiling hooks. A flamingo lamp in one corner glowed pink. It winked at me, or so I thought. A man with a clipboard approached. Newcomers, he said, smiling. Welcome to the illuminated aviary. He introduced himself as Clive, tall, bearded, with a jumper covered in tiny puffins. I'm your host for the evening, he said grandly. Around the room, people smiled and nodded. Some patted their lamps affectionately. One lady fussed over a toucan lamp like it was a newborn. My wife's smile grew wider. This is delightful, she whispered. I leaned closer. It's a cult, I whispered back. Clive clapped his hands. Let's begin. Derek, a retired postman, stood up. He carried a swan lamp. The neck curved elegantly. The bulb glowed softly inside like a tiny sun. Everyone oohed and awed. I calculated how many flamingos could fit in our living room. Too many, I thought. Linda followed. She held a parakeet lamp, wings outstretched, light bulb belly shining brightly. Imported from Belgium, she said proudly. My wife squeezed my hand. We need one like that, she whispered. I gave her a look. Not a chance. Clive turned to me. And you? Any birds to share? I swallowed. Just one, I said. The flamingo. Gasps filled the room. Someone whispered, the legend. Apparently, Leonard, the flamingo lamp, was famous here. known for his bold pink glow, his cheeky charm, his habit of flickering at just the right moment. Clive beamed. "We must visit you," I laughed nervously. "Oh, you don't want to. He's high maintenance," Linda giggled. "You're a brave man." Then a quiet man named George spoke up. "Careful, Leonard. Next thing you know, they'll want matching flamingo cushions." I nearly choked on my tea. "I don't think the cushions come in pink." The room chuckled. After the introductions, Clive invited everyone to share stories. Derek told how his swan lamp helped him make friends after moving to the neighborhood. "People come over just to see the light show," he said. Linda shared how her parakeet lamp once saved her from a power outage. "The bulb lasts forever," she said with a wink. Someone else spoke about a pelican lamp that started a neighborhood feud over decor styles. "It got so bad the pelican was banned from the block party," they joked. We listened. We laughed. My wife whispered, "This is like bird lamp therapy." I nodded. Yes, a very feathered therapy. Before we left, Clive handed us a flyer. "Next week," he said, "we're organizing a bird lamp parade." My wife's eyes lit up. "A parade? How marvelous." I sighed. Well, I guess Leonard is officially a celebrity now. On the drive home, we talked about what we'd seen, the community, the warmth, the absurdity. We laughed about the names people gave their lamps. Gerald the goose, Petunia the pelican, Frank the flamingo. Leonard glowed from the back seat, almost smug. And I realized our flamingo lamp was more than a silly purchase. It was a key, a bridge, a way to meet people, to laugh more, to live a little brighter. The lamp was a story waiting to happen, and we were just getting started. Saturday morning arrived quietly, the kind of quiet that feels like a soft blanket. Birds chirped outside. The sun peeked through thin clouds, not too bright, not too dull, just right. Inside the house, everything seemed different, not in a bad way. More like the house was awake, waiting, expecting something. Leonard, the flamingo lamp, glowed softly in his corner, pink light washing the walls like a gentle tide, almost like he was smiling. Or maybe that was just me. My wife stretched and yawned. She always looked like a cat waking from a nap. Her eyes landed on Leonard. "Do you hear that?" she asked. I blinked, still half in sleep. "Hear what?" She grinned. "The house feels alive." I laughed. "Maybe Leonard is talking to us." She gave me a mock glare. "Don't encourage him." We shuffled to the kitchen. The kettle whistled its morning song. Toast popped up like a jack-in-the-box. The phone rang. Startling in the calm morning, I grabbed it quickly. "Hello?" Margaret, our ever-watchful flamingo lamp enthusiast. Her voice was breathless. "You're not going to believe this." I sat down, coffee warming my hands. "Try me." "There's been a development." I raised an eyebrow. "Development?" "Yes." "The neighbors." "Oh?" "They've noticed Leonard." I glanced toward the lamp. The pink glow seemed to pulse proudly. Margaret continued, excitement rising. "And they want to meet him." My wife laughed softly. "Meet Leonard? What will he say?" "Hello, I'm your new best friend." Margaret was serious. "This is important. A neighborhood event." "Yes, they're calling it the Flamingo Fete." I nearly choked on coffee. "A fete? Seriously?" "Yes, tea, biscuits, the whole shebang." Leonard's light flickered like a wink. My wife grinned. "Well, we can't disappoint the fans." Margaret gave details. "Tomorrow, 2 o'clock, front garden." I looked outside. The garden was neat, but not Fed-ready. My wife's eyes sparkled. "We'll need decorations." I sighed. "This just keeps getting better." Margaret added, "Everyone's bringing something." I pictured neighbors lugging trays of mysterious baked goods. My wife nodded. Maybe we should bake. I imagined a flamingo cake, pink icing everywhere, a disaster waiting to happen. I'm sure Leonard will appreciate the effort. Margaret's voice dropped conspiratorially. There might be a best-dressed flamingo contest. I laughed. You're joking. Nope, my wife chuckled. We should enter. I shook my head. I draw the line at dressing Leonard in feathers. Leonard flickered again, as if to say, challenge accepted. I wondered if lamps could be competitive. The rest of the morning passed in a buzz. We made a list. Balloons? Streamers? Pink, of course. I suggested less flamingo pink. My wife gave me the "you're impossible" look. We talked about music. Should there be flamingo-themed songs? I Googled flamingo songs. Apparently they exist. My wife laughed. You are truly obsessed. Just trying to make the fete memorable. We debated food, biscuits, scones, maybe some cucumber sandwiches. Leonard seemed unimpressed. Later, the neighbors started arriving early. First was Mr. Collins. He brought a big box. I hope it's not another flamingo. Nope, my wife said. It's a cake. The cake was pink, oddly shaped and suspiciously wobbling. We named it Flamingo Disaster. Mrs. Patel arrived next. She brought homemade lemonade. Fresh and tart, she promised. Leonard glowed brighter. Maybe he liked the attention. Across the street, the Thompsons appeared, carrying 2 lamps. One was a flamingo, the other a strange-looking owl. Competition, whispered my wife. We laughed. Leonard blinked in agreement. The fete began with tea poured carefully, biscuits shared with laughter, stories told about flamingos and lamps. Mr. Collins tried to convince Leonard to dance. Leonard remained stubbornly still. Mrs. Patel insisted her lemonade was the best. Everyone agreed, though the Thompsons sneaked extra sugar. Kids ran around wearing pink hats. Someone played a ukulele. The flamingo-themed playlist started, off-key but joyful. Leonard basked in the glow of his admirers. By the end, Leonard was the star. Our flamingo lamp had brought the neighborhood together, and I realized sometimes the oddest things spark the brightest joy. The morning after the flamingo fete felt different. The house was quieter. Leonard still glowed softly in his corner, but something had changed. The fete had left its mark, not just on the garden, but on the whole neighborhood. I wandered into the living room. Leonard seemed to be watching me, or maybe I was watching Leonard. Either way, it felt like a conversation waiting to happen. My wife joined me with a cup of tea. She looked amused. I think Leonard's a celebrity now, I laughed. Who knew a flamingo lamp could be so popular? She shook her head. And you thought he was just a silly purchase? I shrugged. Silly purchases make life interesting. The phone rang again. Margaret. She was back with news. Leonard is the talk of the town, she said. Did you see the Facebook group? I hadn't. There was a Facebook group? Yes, she said. Flamingo Fans United. I pictured a dozen middle-aged people posting flamingo memes and lamp selfies. Margaret laughed. They even made a hashtag, #living with Leonard #. My wife groaned. Seriously? Yes. The neighbors had embraced Leonard like a new member of the family. The quirky kind of family. Later that day, the doorbell rang. It was Mr. Thompson, carrying his owl lamp. He smiled sheepishly. Leonard's got competition, I smiled back. Looks like you brought a rival. He set down the owl lamp. It's Gerald. Gerald the owl? Yep. My wife laughed. Gerald looks serious. Someone's got to keep an eye on Leonard, I nodded. Guarding the Flamingo Kingdom. Gerald was impressive, tall, brooding, with eyes that seemed to pierce the soul. Leonard flickered pink in response, or maybe it was just a wiring glitch. And the neighbors started visiting more often. They'd stop by just to see Leonard and Gerald side by side. Mrs. Patel brought homemade cookies. Pink sugar cookies for Leonard, she said, and oatmeal for Gerald. The kids invented flamingo-themed games. Pin the beak on Leonard. Flamingo freeze dance. Even Mr. Collins joined in, though he complained loudly about the noise. My wife and I found ourselves hosting impromptu flamingo parties. Sometimes it was tea, sometimes lemonade, always laughter. One afternoon, Leonard went missing. We panicked. Where could he be? Turns out the cat had knocked him off the table. He was safe, just a little dusty. That gave us an idea. A flamingo lamp treasure hunt. We hid Leonard in different places around the house. Neighbors came over following clues to find him. It was ridiculous and wonderful. The story of Leonard spread far beyond our street. Someone posted pictures online. Before we knew it, flamingo lamps everywhere were popping up. We joked that Leonard had started a revolution. My wife said, "If this keeps up, we might need a flamingo lamp fan club president." I said, "I volunteer as tribute." She laughed. "You're impossible." Leonard glowed softly, as if approving my enthusiasm. By the end of the week, Leonard had become more than a lamp. He was a symbol of whimsy, of joy, of the unexpected magic in ordinary things, and maybe, just maybe, of the power of a silly pink flamingo lamp to bring people together. The weekend had rolled around once again. The house felt calm, cozy even. Leonard sat quietly in his usual spot, glowing softly, like an old friend welcoming us home. My wife poured 2 cups of tea. The steam curled upward like little ghosts. I took a sip. She settled next to me on the couch. Her eyes twinkled as she glanced toward Leonard. "Do you think Leonard knows he's famous now?" she asked, a playful smile tugging at her lips. I chuckled. "Well, if he had a beak and could puff out his chest, I bet he'd be preening non-stop." We both laughed. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Again, I groaned softly. "You're not going to tell me it's another Flamingo fan club meeting?" My wife gave me a "don't be rude" look. I opened the door to find Mrs. Green from next door. She was holding a basket covered with a faded floral cloth. "For Leonard," she said, her eyes sparkling with mischief and warmth. Inside the basket were cookies. Flamingo-shaped cookies, pink icing, some slightly crooked, clearly homemade with love and a good dash of humor. We invited Mrs. Green inside. She took a seat, eyeing Leonard like he was a rock star backstage. "You know," she said, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "I never thought I'd be interested in a lamp, not even a little. But Leonard has charm." My wife nodded. "It's the pink light, I think. It changes the whole room, makes it feel alive." Mrs. Green smiled. "I think it's more than that." We all leaned back, sipping our tea, talking about how small, unexpected things can brighten life, like a glowing pink flamingo lamp, like a shared laugh on a quiet afternoon, like neighbors who suddenly feel like friends. In the days that followed, Leonard became a fixture, a part of the neighborhood's daily rhythm. Neighbors stopped by more often, sometimes just to say hello, sometimes to borrow a cup of sugar, sometimes to sneak a peek at Leonard and marvel at his pink glow. One morning, Mr. Collins arrived with a wide, goofy grin. In his hands was a tiny straw hat. "Got a new hat for Leonard," he announced proudly. My wife burst out laughing. "Well, Leonard's officially a fashion icon now." We carefully perched the hat on Leonard's shade. He looked festive, like he was ready to attend a garden party hosted by flamingos. The kids started calling Leonard Sir Pink a lot. The title stuck, and honestly, it suited him. One chilly evening, the power went out. A blackout spread over the whole neighborhood. We lit candles throughout the house, but the real star was Leonard. Plugged into our backup generator, he glowed pink in the shadows, a soft, comforting light in the darkness. The neighbors gathered outside, drawn to the gentle glow. Mrs. Patel smiled and said, "It's like a lighthouse, a beacon of silliness and hope." I nodded in agreement. Yes, exactly that. The flamingo lamp was more than just a lamp now. It had become a symbol of community, of shared joy, of the unexpected ways life brings people together. Days rolled into weeks. Leonard's fame did not fade. If anything, it grew. One afternoon, my wife and I found Leonard wearing a scarf, a bright woolly scarf in shades of pink and purple. A neighbor had stopped by and left it for Leonard. We laughed. Leonard had officially joined the neighborhood family, and in the quiet moments, when the house was still, Leonard's soft pink glow was a gentle reminder that sometimes joy comes in the strangest forms. Sometimes it's wrapped in pink feathers. Sometimes it's a lamp that glows with personality. And sometimes it's simply a flamingo lamp lighting the way home. Later that week, I caught myself talking to Leonard. Just small things like, "Don't let the cat knock you over again," or "You're looking sharp with that hat." My wife overheard and teased me mercilessly. "Careful, or Leonard might start charging rent." I smiled, and I'd happily pay it. Leonard blinked his pink light, or maybe that was just a wiring quirk. Either way, it felt like approval. Morning arrived like a gentle sigh. The sun stretched its golden fingers across the room. Soft light spilled over the curtains and painted the walls with warmth. Pinky sat quietly on his pedestal, glowing softly. He seemed to know today was special. My wife and I sat by the window, mugs of steaming tea in hand. Outside, the neighborhood was waking up slowly. Birds began their morning chatter. Leaves rustled softly in the breeze. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked cheerfully. The air smelled like freshly cut grass and promise. I took a sip of tea and looked at my wife. "Remember the first time we saw Pinky?" I asked. She smiled, eyes twinkling. "That ridiculous flamingo lamp we never planned to buy," she said, laughing softly. I chuckled. "We thought it was a joke." She nodded. "And now look at him." I gestured toward the glowing lamp. "He's the unofficial mayor of the street." We both laughed quietly. Today was Pinky Day. The entire neighborhood had come together to celebrate. It was a surprise celebration, planned secretly by Mr. Collins and a few other enthusiastic neighbors. Invitations had been slipped under doors. Pinky Day promised to be full of fun, laughter, and, of course, flamingo-themed everything. The morning buzzed with preparation. The Millers hung pink and white bunting across their porch. Little paper flamingos danced in the breeze. Mrs. Miller was humming happily as she arranged flamingo-shaped cookies on a platter. "They smell delicious," she said. "I'm sure Pinky would approve." The kids practiced flamingo dances on the sidewalk. Their arms flapped and their legs balanced on one foot. "Like this," shouted Timmy, the self-appointed flamingo king. He wobbled and nearly fell, but caught himself with a triumphant grin. Down the street, the local bakery delivered a spectacular cake. It was enormous. Pink icing swirled in soft peaks. Flamingo toppers stood proudly on the top tier. Sprinkles dotted the cake like tiny confetti bursts. The baker, Mrs. Lopez, smiled proudly. We wanted to make it as cheerful as Pinky. My wife was busy decorating our porch. She carefully tied pink ribbons around the chairs, hung little fairy lights that twinkled like stars. I was tasked with arranging the chairs and clearing the porch. Our cat watched from a distance, perched on the windowsill, clearly unimpressed. Neighbors started arriving, carrying dishes, drinks, and wide smiles. Some wore pink flamingo hats, others sported scarves or feather boas. Old Mr. Harris arrived with a giant pink bow tie. He winked at me and said, "If Leonard can do it, so can I." The street buzzed with happy chatter. At the center of the gathering was Mr. Collins, glowing with pride. He took the makeshift stage, a simple wooden crate covered in a pink cloth. He cleared his throat and began to speak. "Friends and neighbors," he said, voice full of warmth, "today we celebrate more than a lamp. We celebrate community, joy, and the unexpected moments that bring us together." Applause rippled through the crowd. Then came the games. Flamingo ring toss was wildly popular. Kids squealed with delight when rings landed around the pink plastic birds. Pin the feather on the flamingo brought out fierce competition. There was laughter, playful cheating, and plenty of good-natured teasing. The storytelling contest was a highlight. Neighbors shared tales about Pinky's adventures, some true, some wildly imaginative. One story told how Pinky had saved the street from a power outage by shining so brightly that it guided the mail carrier home. Another claimed Pinky had taught the cat to dance, a claim met with skeptical looks and muffled chuckles. Later, Timmy led a flamingo march down the block. He took it seriously, flapping his arms and balancing on one foot. The neighborhood dogs mostly ignored him, except for one curious beagle who joined in with a happy bark. Children cheered and clapped. As the sun dipped low, everyone gathered for cake. Pinky's glow softened the fading light. We sang, laughed, shared stories and memories. I looked at my wife and whispered, "Who knew a flamingo lamp could do all this?" She smiled. Neither of us did, but I'm glad it did. We raised our mugs in a quiet toast. To Pinky, to joy, to community, to unexpected adventures. That night, as the street grew still, Pinky's pink light washed over the room. Our cat curled up beside him, purring softly. I sat back as feeling a deep sense of peace. Sometimes it's the smallest, silliest things that make life truly special. And sometimes those silly things light up the darkest corners. The morning after Pinky Day, the neighborhood felt different. There was a new energy in the air, a lightness in people's steps, a few extra smiles exchanged over garden fences. Pinky had done something magical. He'd brought a little spark to the everyday. My wife and I were still basking in the glow of the celebration. "Do you think Pinky knows how much he means to everyone?" I asked. She chuckled. "I'm pretty sure he does. Lamps have a way of knowing things." Our cat, as usual, was unimpressed. He eyed Pinky with a look that said, "I tolerate you." That day, the postman stopped by again. This time, he handed me a small envelope. "From the neighbors," he said with a grin. Inside was a card decorated with tiny flamingos in all sorts of poses. It read, "Thank you for bringing Pinky into our lives. He's brighter than the sun and twice as fun." We smiled. It was a simple thing, but it meant the world. Later, the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Jenkins from down the street. She was holding a small potted plant. "I thought Pinky might like a companion," she said, smiling. The plant was a tall, elegant fern with leaves that seemed to wave hello. We placed it beside Pinky. It was a perfect match. The fern and Pinky became fast friends. They seemed to brighten the room together. Sometimes I imagined the fern whispering secrets to Pinky. Pinky, in turn, seemed to respond with a warm glow. That evening, we had friends over for dinner. Our living room was full of laughter. Stories flew like butterflies. Of course, Pinky was the star. "How did you come up with the name?" one friend asked. My wife grinned. "It just felt right, like he was part of the family." Another friend joked, "I'm thinking of getting a flamingo lamp myself. Might bring some charm to my office." Everyone laughed. The cat, meanwhile, had found a new favorite spot. He curled up in the chair next to Pinky, watching his glowing friend with great interest. At one point, he pawed at the lamp switch, almost like he wanted to turn Pinky off and on again. We all laughed. Even the cat was getting into the spirit. Over the next few days, small surprises kept coming. A flamingo-shaped cookie appeared on our doorstep. A neighbor left a pink scarf with a note, "For Pinky's next adventure." Even the local cafe started serving Pinky Punch, a fruity pink drink with a tiny flamingo stirrer. One afternoon, I found myself sitting by Pinky, thinking about how much joy a simple lamp had brought. It wasn't just about the light, it was about connection, community, shared laughter. Pinky was a reminder to find joy in unexpected places. That night, as I turned Pinky off and prepared for bed, I felt grateful for the little things, for the quirky surprises, for the pink flamingo lamp that had become a beacon of happiness. The next morning, the sun barged through the windows like it owned the place. Pinky's soft glow was already fading with the daylight, but his presence lingered like a cheeky grin. My wife was in the kitchen, humming a tune that suspiciously sounded like a flamingo-themed jingle. I sat in the living room, watching Pinky and nursing my coffee like it was a life raft. Then, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Curious, I shuffled to the door like a detective on a slow case. There stood Mr. Thompson, our usually grumpy neighbor who looked about as cheerful as a Monday morning. But today, he was holding a shiny box wrapped with way too much ribbon. "Thought you might like this," he said, trying to sound casual but clearly proud. I took the gift with the enthusiasm of someone receiving a slightly used toaster. Inside was a flamingo-shaped coaster set. "For Pinky's entourage," he said with a wink. We both laughed, which was surprising because laughter around Mr. Thompson was as rare as a flamingo in winter. Later, my wife wandered into the living room. She surveyed the growing collection of flamingo paraphernalia. "There's a whole flock forming," she said with a grin that mixed amusement and mild disbelief. I nodded. Pinky's definitely not a solo act anymore. Just then, the phone rang. It was Mrs. Patel, the neighborhood social butterfly with a voice as sweet as honey. She invited us to a neighborhood potluck with a very specific theme: flamingos. "Pinky's inspired us all," she declared. That evening, the street was alive with music, laughter, and a suspiciously large number of pink decorations. Tables groaned under the weight of flamingo-shaped cookies, pink salads that tasted suspiciously like beetroot, and pink lemonade served with tiny flamingo stirrers that made everyone giggle. Neighbors swapped stories and jokes, many involving Pinky's secret powers. Kids played games, adults caught up on the usual gossip, and even the local postman seemed to have a smile on his face, possibly because he was hoping for leftover cake. Pinky perched proudly on our porch, glowing softly as if to say, "I'm the life of this party." At one point, a group of kids gathered near Pinky, whispering conspiratorially. "He can make your dreams come true," little Emma said, wide-eyed. "Only if you promise to do the flamingo dance," added her brother Max, flapping his arms and hopping on one foot. They giggled and danced around the lamp like they were auditioning for a wildlife documentary. Inside, my wife and I exchanged amused glances. "Who knew a lamp could be such a diva?" I said. She smiled. "It's not just the lamp, it's the story we've built around it." Days rolled by, and Pinky's fame only grew. The local newspaper ran a story headlined, "The Flamingo That United a Neighborhood." Neighbors posted photos on social media, tagging Pinky like he was a celebrity. He had become a symbol of friendship, fun, and the ability to find joy in the oddest places. One afternoon, I was dusting Pinky, an operation that required patience and a slightly ridiculous dance to avoid knocking over the fern next to him. Our cat jumped up on the table, eyes fixed on Pinky like he was sizing up a rival. He stared at the lamp, then looked at me with what could only be interpreted as, "I still own part of this human." I chuckled and gave him a gentle scratch behind the ears, wondering if the cat secretly wanted to swap Pinky for a laser pointer. That night, my wife and I sat together, Pinky's glow casting playful shadows on the walls. We talked about how a simple shopping trip had led to all of this. How a flamingo lamp, utterly ridiculous and utterly charming, had become the heart of our community. And how sometimes it's the smallest, silliest things that bring the biggest light. As I switched Pinky off for the night, I whispered, "Thank you for the light you've given us, in more ways than one." My wife smiled. We settled in for the night, hearts full, dreams bright, and Pinky quietly glowing in the corner, ready for whatever adventures tomorrow might bring. The days turned into weeks. Pinky settled in like the beloved eccentric relative who never leaves your house but somehow makes it better. Our home was filled with laughter, light, and a little bit of pink glow that no one could quite explain, except that it felt like happiness in lamp form. Neighbors still stopped by, some just to peek at Pinky, others to share a joke about the flamingo invasion. Each visit was a reminder that life doesn't always have to be serious. Sometimes it's about the silly, unexpected moments that become stories to tell. One evening, as I sat reading by Pinky's warm glow, the cat jumped up and gave the lamp a slow blink, the feline version of a nod of approval. I smiled. Maybe Pinky wasn't just a lamp. Maybe he was a reminder to welcome the unexpected, to embrace the ridiculous, to find joy where you least expect it. And with that thought, I switched Pinky off. The room dimmed, but the warmth stayed, because sometimes the brightest lights come not from bulbs or candles, but from the laughter and love we share. So here's to Pinky, the flamingo lamp who taught us all a little bit about light, life, and a whole lot of laughter. And to you, dear listener, may your nights be cozy, your days joyful, and your lamps always a little bit pink. Good night.